Welcome. You're watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna in Aadhaar. A very interesting and crucial case is on at the Supreme Court right now. One that could have far-reaching implications for all of us. The Supreme Court today has asked the Madras High Court not to pass any order yet in a case that demands the linking of Aadhaar numbers with social media accounts like Facebook, etc. It has also agreed to hear several cases in other courts making similar demands. The top court has asked the central government and social media giants to respond by the 13th of September. But why this case is important is also because the state of Tamil Nadu, represented by Attorney General K.K. Venugopal, is convinced that linking Aadhaar to social media accounts is the way to prevent misuse. Now, with the menace of fake news growing, the government is in any case looking at various options to track down who sends what message, including the demand from WhatsApp to break its encryption when agencies demand. It also leads to a much bigger debate, and since it's one that involves all of us, we want to know what you think too. So go to our Twitter handle, ETNowLive, and answer this poll. Should Aadhaar be linked to social media accounts? We'll tell you what most people are saying at the end of this debate. Also telling us what they think this evening are Pawan Duggal, president of Cyberlaws.net and well-known cybersecurity analyst, Prakashs, affiliated fellow at Yale Information Society Project, and senior Supreme Court advocate Aishwarya Bharti is also joining us. We're also joined today by the petitioner who demanded that Aadhaar be linked with social media accounts in Tamil Nadu, Anthony Clement Rubin. Welcome to all of you and thank you for speaking with us today. Mr. Rubin, let me begin by asking you to sort of set the scene. You're one of many petitioners, of course, but what is the reason that you are okay or are pushing for Aadhaar to be linked to Facebook accounts? Aren't you worried about the lack of privacy or the misuse possibly that could take place?
My petition mainly is about not only just Aadhaar, it's also about Aadhaar or any other government-related IDs for social media as well as utility services. But I find it, for me, when I was bullied on Facebook, when I went to the police and filed a case, they weren't able to find out who was the perpetrator behind this particular page, and the page is still active. This page who has been abusing not just me, a lot of other people, animal activists, is very much active. So after multiple complaints to the police and also a court direction, when police said they're not able to do it, and also I saw lots and lots of cyberbullying happening, cases happening, and said, okay, I should do something. I wrote to try, and all the other ministries, department, they didn't reply. And then I went up to the Madras High Court, filed a writ petition asking them to link this Aadhaar or any other any other government IDs to social media as well as utility services.
Yeah.
Plus, also I've asked to form an e-task force so the crime rate reduces.
Okay, that petition of course has snowballed. Interestingly enough, there are similar ones now in at least 4 courts. Pranesh, where do you stand on this entire debate and the very specific demand that Rubin has made to link Aadhaar? He says Aadhaar or any other government generated number so that you can track down the perpetrator of the bullying that he faced, for example. Just my question is that the government seems so efficient, various governments, in tracking down people who have put out things on social media that politicians don't like or sitting ministers don't like. Those people are tracked down and arrested immediately. Why is it so difficult to track down cyberbullies?
It isn't any different if you take a look at it. The thing to pay attention here, I feel, is that if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So an ID like Aadhaar is not going to make it any more easy to actually find perpetrators, because those who are asking for such linkage forget that there already are various kinds of things linked to your ID, such as your IP address, in many cases your email address, your phone number. So on multiple social networks, they actually ask for these kinds of details, and they in any case have IP address. So the problem is not so much that they don't have information about you. The problem is that the police is not able to access this information. That takes us to a completely different once you frame the problem correctly, the solution you see is to make it easier to get information for the Indian police from US-based or China-based companies, which is a question of mutual legal assistance treaties. There's a new law that's been passed on this called the Cloud Act in the US, which makes it, which India can essentially try to be part of, and which makes it easier to get access from companies like Facebook and so on. So the problem is not that there's anonymity. The problem is that even whatever information these companies have, they're not always able to provide because lawful requests are not always made. And even when they're made, it takes time to verify that they are okay with under American law and then pass on the information. So that is what needs fixing. The second thing I will point out is that when it comes to cyberbullying, that's actually prohibited on platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. So if the terms of service violations complaints that Mr. Rubin has filed don't seem to show that there is cyberbullying, then it's highly unlikely that a legal complaint is somehow going to find success where the terms of service complaint directly to Facebook, they find that there is no cyberbullying. So it's
no, but that was part of that was specifically part of Mr. Rubin's petition that I went through. Mr. Rubin, wasn't your complaint that these social media giants, or in your specific case, if I'm not mistaken, you were referring to Facebook, didn't respond to your complaint, and that is why you thought you had to take it to different authorities? Pranesh's point is that if Facebook didn't find anything wrong, then it's unlikely a court of law will.
Yes. It's not exactly right, because for them, what is the community standards for them varies from country to country and to state as well. So, for my particular, derogatory post which is put on Facebook, when I reported, they said no, they're not responding. When I responded, and then afterwards, when I went to the police, and when police sent a request, they said they were not getting response. And actually, one of the police officers in the cybercrime told me it takes close to about 2 years for reply to come from Facebook on these kind of comments. It's only when child pornography or some terrorism they reply. Otherwise, it doesn't take. It takes them a long time to reply. Is what they gave, and they've also given documents in court.
And this time frame won't change just by adding any government ID.
Okay.
So the problem is how long it's taking. The problem isn't that there isn't any government ID attached.
No,
that's a wrong solution to a non-existent problem.
Okay, but what is the issue with a government ID? Let me come to that. Let me come to Pawan Duggal on that. What is the concern if a government ID is attached to a social media account? Of course, Aadhaar by itself becomes very controversial, and the petition, and several of the petition are not speaking only about Aadhaar, but Aadhaar is the most prominent, prevalent and widely used. What is the contention against attaching Aadhaar to a Facebook account or a Twitter account or WhatsApp for that matter?
First and foremost, we need to appreciate that internationally there are no specific norms in this regard. So quickly we are trying to find out national solutions to issues and challenges that are basically transnational in nature. And I'm not so sure whether we will really be successful in doing the same. Number two, if you want to link Aadhaar with social media, quickly realize that a large number of these social media players are located outside the territorial boundaries of your own country. So effectively, you want your Aadhaar information to be available on the servers of these foreign companies, which are further amenable to foreign state and non-state actors. So the net effect of this ultimately could be that not only would your fundamental right to privacy be impacted, your right to data privacy be impacted, but more significantly, it could prejudicially even impact Indian nation's sovereignty, security and integrity, as also India's sovereign interest in cyberspace. So on paper, it may look a very attractive argument. When you actually go a bit deeper and you quickly start realizing that there's not much efficacy in this kind of an approach. And why are we only thinking that all these bullies will only get their accounts connected with a governmental ID and then go ahead and do bullying? What stops them from using the dark net for the purposes of perpetuating the various cyber crimes or cyber terror purposes?
Okay.
So I think we are trying to come up with a completely new kind of an approach to a problem which does not really warrant it. You actually want to kill a small ant with a big atom bomb. That kind of an approach may not be very, very conducive in the long term, both from the individual's liberties perspectives and also from the perspective of Indian nation as a sovereign nation.
Aishwarya, where do you stand on this? Where do you stand? So there are multiple angles to this. One, of course, is the user's privacy and the concern that do you really want government authorities snooping on your private messages if it comes to that. On the other hand, of course, there's the concern about, fake news and other kind of threats. Where do you stand on this debate? Do you think that linking Aadhaar will actually solve the problem?
Well, so I think that this is, this is a problem which is, I agree with Dugal Saab that this has many dimensions and you can't have a quick fix solution to it just by linking of Aadhaar. See, we have to appreciate that now, as more of our life is moved into the virtual world, the issues which are around our disputes have also moved to virtual world, and there are all kinds of law enforcement problems which are also happening. So they are essentially two very strong competing claims that need to be balanced out. That is what has been indicated by the Supreme Court also today. And two very strong competing claims are one of a privacy which is which is recognized by a constitution bench as a fundamental right that is available, and secondly the aspect that social media, you will also find that Supreme Court judgments are there with regard to issues like mob lynching, etc., where it is strongly recognized and it is understood that social media platforms play a very significant role and sometimes a very deviant role in spreading the kind of false rumors and false news which actually leads to very sinister kind of law enforcement problems. So these are two very strong competing claims, and but we can't find answers to them just by linking of Aadhaar. Aadhaar has a completely different connotation. We have a judgment by the Supreme Court on Aadhaar also, where the usage of Aadhaar by all private entities has been completely not allowed, and those provisions of the Act have been set aside. So we will have to, this can't be by way of an arrangement like this. Legislation is required, legislation which protects these two strong competing claims. We can't have a complete blanket in the name of privacy also, that there is no access to the information or any crime information that is happening. Now, Dugal Saab also mentioned about the dark net. That is a very strong...
But no, Aishwarya, I just want to come in there. So then you're talking about this middle ground. How do you access this privacy? This is the basic question, isn't it? How do you access this information without violating people's privacy, and do generally people have faith in the discretion that law enforcement agencies or governments will have? How do people know that this power to read messages will not be misused against those who say something that the authorities don't like?
See, Tamanna, the power of misuse or the possibility of misuse is available with any power or any authority that is there. In our regular lives, physical lives also that we have, not in the virtual world, the law enforcement agencies do have the power to look at records whenever there is any violation of law, etc. But there is a prima facie case that has to be established. Then there are a lot of parameters, that there are safeguards which are already there. Arrest cannot happen without following the proper procedure. The search and seizure cannot happen without proper warrants, etc. So the law, the rule of law prescribes these checks and balances at every stage in the jurisprudence. It will have to be the same fundamental parameters, but it will have to apply to a virtual world where the realities are very different from the physical world. That is why you can't have just, that's why linking Aadhaar is really not going to solve the purpose. It's not a quick fix solution.
Where are the checks and balances in the virtual world? Ruben, do you want to comment on some of the comments made here? A very interesting point by Mr. Dugal, that if you want to link, say, Aadhaar to Facebook, effectively an American giant will have access to Indian Aadhaar numbers and possibly the details attached to it in such a large number. Do we want that to happen?
See, See what over here is why just asking them, they don't need to even link it. Okay, let's keep it this way. Why don't they have a mechanism where they just reveal the IP when a police complaint or a magistrate order is given, and that would simply solve the problem. And they make billions of money. Let's be honest about it. These guys make billions and billions of money. They can make innovative technologies to identify perpetrators, have algorithms, AI methods to respond to crime. It's pretty straightforward, but why are they not doing this? Why are they encouraging, these cyberbullies and criminals go scot-free? Is my biggest concern, because I'm more looking at a safe environment for everyone. I mean, it's just not me. Forget the Aadhaar linking. How about identifying, what is the solution going to be? For example, the page who abused me is still very active. They are still posting abusive content. I mean, I went into court, I went into police. Not everyone is going to go to the police station, and everyone's going to go to court and pursue so much.
Yeah.
So there's a difference. How many people have come out and open and complain?
No, Ruben, you have a point there. You have a point that cyberbullying does take place. There is misuse of that power. But what are you going to do? Pranesh, you want to come in on that, and then I'm going to go to the suggestions made by Professor Kamakoti. Ruben referred to them obliquely in some way. I'll come in more details. But Pranesh, on the basic question that many people have suffered, whether it's abuse on Twitter, whether it's on Facebook, even on WhatsApp, this abuse is very possible.
Absolutely. And for each of these, for instance, WhatsApp is linked to people's phone numbers. Yeah. So there is an ID already, and to get a phone number in India, to get a SIM card, you need to show some government ID. So I'm afraid that what Mr. Rubin has done by converting what should be a criminal complaint, an ordinary criminal complaint, into a PIL, and I don't know how a court could possibly accept a PIL where there isn't even a clear line in his affidavit or in his plaint about what fundamental right of his is actually violated, or of the public is violated, which is a requirement under Article 226. So even that isn't there. So firstly, this PIL should not have been heard. And now when he says that let them at least give IP addresses, now that it's far beyond that. The Supreme Court is seized of the matter. The Attorney General is arguing for governmental ID, including Aadhaar. So there's a problem. Now, let's be clear that linking government ID will not fix the problem, which is about transnational issues, as Mr. Dugal pointed out.
Yeah.
Okay, it's about US-based companies responding to Indian law requests, a law enforcement request, and the reason why they don't just give it out like that is because US law requires them not to. That's the reason they don't just hand out IP addresses to any police department that asks, because then every authoritarian country in the world will just make these kinds of requests, and you'll have the same fate. So that's the reason why they don't do it, and American law also comes in the way. There's a law specifically on this matter called the Cloud Act, which was passed last year, and which would get in the way. So
but Pranesh, the Americans have access to the data. The Americans have access to the data, don't they?
Americans have access to data that's in US jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Right? They don't have access to, for instance, ShareChat. It's an Indian company. Okay, they don't have access to ShareChat's data. They don't have access to all social media data in the world, okay, legally. And that is why they passed that law, to make it easier for different countries to make law enforcement requests across borders and so on. So there's a fundamental problem. And now that this has become a thing that the Attorney General has taken up, that the state of Tamil Nadu has taken up, it's no longer possible to say, okay, fine, we already have an ID thing, which is called the IP address. Okay. And so let's, sorry, I made a wrong complaint.
No, but it wasn't just Ruben. Pranesh, I think you're being a little harsh. I'm going to give Ruben a chance to respond, but there are 4 petitions. There are 4 petitions which are very similar in 4 different courts, which is why Facebook has gone to the Supreme Court and said that let's hear them all together. They're making similar demands.
None of them have been made by a person who understands technology.
Yeah, but they are at the receiving end of it. Are we going to say that only those who understand technology can go and file complaints?
So if I could just say something.
Okay, Ruben, I'll let you come in. Yeah, Ruben.
So if I'm into social media marketing myself. And if you want to promote on Facebook, you have to you can enter your GST number, and then you can get your bills and claims and everything. So they do have a company in India to generate income and to make millions and millions and billions of money. So if they do have the office and GST number, then definitely they come under the Indian purview to when they can make money. Why don't they be responsible and take care of our citizens as well? It's not that they can't, it's just that they are being irresponsible, I feel.
Okay, Mr. Duggal, you want to comment on that? You want to comment on the point that Ruben is making?
Well, at the end of the day, it's a very mixed kind of an feeling situation that we're coming up to, because right now it's not just about identity being connected to social media. Right now it's also issues pertaining to cybersecurity. How secure is that particular identity going to be?
Yeah.
How secure is it going to be in the light of the Clouds Act that the US has passed? In any case, the US says, well, the moment your data is floating through my networks, I will assume jurisdiction. So at the end of the day, by coming up with such kind of a prayer, are we not somewhere trying to contribute to prejudicially impacting Indian sovereignty or sovereign interests? I think that's a fundamental question. And more so, you have to quickly realize in today's scenario, India does not have a data localization law. The Information Technology Act 2000 is completely silent on data localization. So in a scenario like that, the bigger question that comes up for consideration is, what kind of a control will the sovereign government have should the linkages take place? Already now the amendments to the Aadhaar Act have been passed, opening up the doors for new set of litigations and legal challenges. But the question arises is that we could potentially look at more innovative situations. For example, how about trying to see if India comes up with a strong legal framework to target cyberbullying, cyber nuisance, cyber trolling and fake news.
But it's
those
not,
are areas that are not specifically covered under the IT Act. How about
but Mr. Duggal, even if India has stronger laws, even if India has stronger laws, the confusion here or the complaint here is that it takes very long and is near impossible to cite the originator of this false propaganda or news. That is the issue. And in some cases it could be cyberbullying, like what Mr. Ruben says he has faced. In some cases it could be a call to violence.
So the issue is, let's try to fundamentally address the problem. The problem is not that you link the governmental identity with a social media account. The problem is come up with a new reviewed approach on intermediary liability. Come up with amendments to Section 79 of the IT Act. Make these guys responsible. Already the IT Act says whether you are physically located in India or not, the moment your services are available on a computer system or network physically in India, you become amenable to Indian law. But most of these companies, these social media companies, are not complying with Indian law, saying I'm an American company governed by American laws. It's time for you to actually strip them of whatever little protection that they have and enforce that they better well comply with the Indian law. Otherwise, strict criminal action needs to be taken against them. Okay. Let's come up with some test cases.
I see Pranesh nodding vigorously.
You cannot target the Indian market. You cannot take billions.
Yeah, I see Pranesh nodding vigorously. Pranesh, are you not? I'm assuming you're not, agreeable to what Mr. Duggal is saying right now.
That's a terrible idea, because firstly, when someone speaks on Facebook, it's not Facebook speaking, it is that person speaking. Making Facebook liable for it would be wrong. That would be like saying, because I appeared on a TV show, the satellite carrier of the TV show should be held liable. Okay, it's just as, absurd. That can't be the standard. There is a problem which the US has tried to provide a solution for, because they themselves faced it when trying to access Microsoft data located in Ireland. So they passed this thing called the Cloud Act, under which different governments, different countries can get approval and facilitate law enforcement information sharing. So there exists a framework. Now, if India is unhappy with this framework, let's get an international framework for this. Okay, which is what multiple people, such as the Internet and Jurisdiction Project, are trying. Okay, so there are various projects that understand that, that this time lag is a huge problem. The center that I used to work at, we worked on this issue for many years. Okay, and so it is a real problem. I don't want to understate the existence of a problem faced by law enforcement agencies in India. The difficulty is that the solution proposed does not at all address the problem. Either the solution proposed by Mr. Rubin nor the solution right now being proposed by Mr. Duggal. Okay, there are frameworks that people have been working towards for years, and getting those frameworks implemented and raising this at an international level, those would be better approaches. And Mr. Duggal himself has been part of a lot of this discussion too.
Okay.
So I'm unclear why he wants a different approach at this stage.
Okay, I'm gonna let Mr. Duggal respond to that very quickly before I go to Aishwarya Bhati. Mr. Duggal, we've still not, addressed the basic question as well. We've been talking over here that it's difficult for law enforcement authorities to sometimes find perpetrators of fake news, of cyberbullying, etc. But what about the alacrity that law enforcement authorities show when arresting or detaining people who put out social media posts that the government in power doesn't like to hear?
So clearly there's a challenge, the issue on capacity building out there, the potentiality and the probability of misusing the provisions of law definitely exists, and we find many cases where the law is abused in a scenario when it ought not to have done. But the scenario is there is a lack of a political will here. When the IT Act and Section 1 and Subsection 2 and Section 75(1) gives you the power to assume jurisdiction upon these social media companies, why do you allow these social media companies to hide behind the observation of the Supreme Court in Shreya Singhal versus Union of India and say, well, you guys, you should be mere spectators, don't act because the Supreme Court has said you will only act on a governmental order or an order from a court of law. There's nothing stopping the government from amending the law, from coming up with new regulations under Section 87 of the Information Technology Act 2000, specifically mandating how they have to respond back in the event of any request for information, or how they have to respond back for pulling down content which is either defamatory or which is cyberbullying in nature. So I think the fundamental issues is that needs to be addressed. If you're going to wait for international scenarios to keep on evolving while mayhem continues to happen on networks, I don't think that will be a good approach.
Let me get Aishwarya Bhati in. Can we wait for international scenarios to play out? How do we make sure it's not heavy-handed? I asked you this question earlier. You talked about the judicial system which has checks and balances, magistrate orders, etc. There has been one suggestion that you get a magistrate's order if you want to hack into or get into someone's social media account or ask WhatsApp to remove its encryption for a certain number, then you get a judicial order on it and then you go ahead.
So Tamanna, like I said, you mentioned the physical barriers are already there in the physical world. We just need to, fit them correctly in the virtual world for them to operate. And I also, for one, think that we can look at the international best practices. As a country, we have always done that. Our constitution is a result of looking at the international best practices. But this is also a very evolving field. Now, I mean, it's not like the developed countries, the best of the developed countries have foolproof laws on data security and allowing, crimes, non-assistance on crimes, I would say. I also understand, I'm not a techie, but I also understand that whatever activity is being done online or on the net, there are digital footprints which are available, and the techies can reach those digital footprints very, very easily. There is some lacuna in law after Shreya Singhal's judgment clearly, but that needs to be filled in before the technology takes another leap and we are found lacking in more areas than one. But strongly two competing areas like I mentioned, and we need to have strong laws which balance out these both competing claims of ensuring that privacy is not taken away. At the same time, the digital world does not become a facilitator for crimes and allows crimes and criminal activities in a almost harbors criminal activities. So
Okay.
that is a strong area for legislation as well as enforcement agencies. Now India has a very bad track record even so far as regular laws for enforcement is concerned. So
Yeah.
obviously the magnitude here is much bigger, the virtual
But,
world is much bigger.
let me come down.
People use the facade of a virtual identity.
No, let me come down to what is really the nub of the debate here. It is, we know that there is misuse of the virtual world, we have a set of laws which actually cover these as well already. The question is, how deep should the government or government agencies be allowed into identities? Should there be any protection of anonymity, and are there grounds for a fear of misuse? Pranesh, let me come to you from that perspective, and we've spoken about it before as well. We've seen the tendency of various governments and enforcement agencies to act with force when they see social media posts or messages that could not be to the liking of the powers that be. We've seen it across political parties, we've seen it across state governments and even at the central government level. Does that then give a lack of confidence that if the government were to have such access, there would be a greater propensity to misuse?
Absolutely. And that's my
completely agree with the
fear,
fact.
not necessarily with linking of Aadhaar, because that's a terrible idea, or linking with any government ID, that's a terrible idea. And in fact, as was pointed out earlier, it's specifically prohibited under Section 7 of the Aadhaar Act, as held by the court in the Aadhaar case. So that is a bad idea, but let's remember that whether it is telephone decryption, so telephone interception, whether it is arresting of people for social media posts that don't violate any law at all and just keeping them in jail for months and months and months without bail, these kinds of things are happening in India, not in some foreign country, not in China. These kinds of things are happening in India when unauthorized interception can happen, even of politicians like Arun Jaitley, of Amar Singh, and people can get away scot-free. Okay, and a lot of this misuse happens not just by governments, okay, but by local police. Okay, so we have to remember that this is also happening, and further, there are if you go through the reports that companies like Google put out, you would realize that they also get fake governmental requests. So people sending requests pretending to be from the government, but actually those are not. And right now, the ways of catching those are inadequate because the Indian government is not very big on things like using digital signatures while sending these requests, unfortunately. So there are a number of problems, and these kinds of linkages won't solve any of them. One other point I'd quickly make is that in 2012 and in 2017, UN Special Rapporteurs on Freedom of Expression have submitted reports which specifically point out that anonymous speech is very much part of the freedom of expression. And India is a signatory to the ICCPR, and this is the position of the UN Human Rights Council as well. So we can't completely ban anonymous speech, since that's very much a part of Article 19(1)(a) and the Article 19
to what extent. We'll have to see to what extent. I'm sure there will be a broad framework of the circumstances under which government agencies will ask for this kind of access. I want to just quickly come to one interesting twist to this entire tale, which has come from an IIT professor called Professor Kamakoti, who has suggested that you have some kind of a unique identity, could be even a phone number, and tag it with the originator's message, the originator being that the first person who sends out that message. If it's WhatsApp, then put in an option to not forward the message, so whoever cuts, copy, pastes becomes then the originator and takes responsibility, and in this case it will make it even easier to trace where that message comes from if the need arises. I'm sure all of you all have seen some of his recommendations. In fact, the Madras High Court is taking them very seriously as well, and they may come into play if there is a final decision on this in whichever court. Mr. Duggal, do you have any comments on what this IIT professor is saying and whether this could be a kind of a solution without removing encryption from a service like WhatsApp?
Well, the observations are indeed very interesting. What we really have to see it, the practical value and the practical implementation of this kind of a suggestion, because you cannot have this kind of a suggestion only implemented within the territorial boundaries of India.
Yeah.
Players who are international in nature may potentially be pushing back, saying, well, I can't do this only for your country. It might also be impacting my encryption related services that I'm actually using. So I think you'll have to ultimately look at it from an international perspective, because a lot of times players are saying, well, I'm putting in end-to-end encryption and I do not have the ability to even go ahead and identify the real source from where it is coming from. And when you complicate that with the complexities that the Tor browser brings across, it's a different ball game altogether. So it looks a very, very interesting idea, but practical implementation will present far more new challenges. But I think it's all about experimentation. We will have to constantly look at new approaches, new mindsets, new methodologies to find out a more effective, efficacious and efficient way of dealing with these challenges.
Ruben, just as we're wrapping, Pranesh, I'm coming to you for Professor Kamakoti, but just Ruben, as we're wrapping up, you've described yourself as a social activist. You've also described yourself as a victim of cyberbullying, and your case has actually taken this entire story forward. Are you personally not concerned at all with the kind of invasion of privacy your petition could open up? Has the thought crossed your mind?
See, it's again, you're making it very sound as if I'm done something wrong. I have not done something wrong to start.
No, not at all.
I've just asked
not at all, not at all.
to get involved and see how this can be.
No, not at all, not at all. You're well within your rights. But just seeing where the story has gone. Yeah.
So again, even Professor Kamakoti's schemes which has been given out, I think it's amazing, and it could be the technology what we are given, the technical aspects which have come out in the Madras High Court's hearing. That's one of the reasons why probably they want to shift the case to Supreme Court itself, because we have experts from IITs who are telling how technology can be used in a more efficient way. Same way protecting people over here. Social doesn't mean just privacy. You also have to be responsible when someone is affected. You cannot say I want my privacy and I'm not concerned about you being a victim as such. So that's where I come from, and I want to place the social medium as such. Let it be safe for children, women, everyone. Yeah. Let it not be a vulnerable space where these cyberbullies hide behind whatever mask up. That's where I'm coming from. I want it safe. So that's where I am. If you can reduce it, if the law enforcing agency and the government and the social medias can come together, work together, I mean, that's the end game. That's what we want. We want a safe environment.
I think that's a fair ask. Pranesh, you're finally nodding to something that Ruben said. That's a fair ask, isn't it?
I agree completely with where he's coming from and the need to address this problem and problems like fake news. Okay, but I just believe that the specific demands made are completely inapplicable. Now, let me quickly point out Professor Kamakoti's solution.
Yeah.
Even if it can be implemented by WhatsApp, and that's a big if, there's a very simple way of going around it, which is instead of pressing the forward button on WhatsApp, just copying and pasting into a new chat. Okay, that will completely get rid of the originator information from the forwarded message.
No, but he has a response to that. Pranesh, he has a response to that, because
there is no. I have read the submission made to the Madras High Court.
Yeah, but he says in that case, then the person who copy paste becomes the originator and then takes responsibility.
Exactly. No, but you have that information in every case, right? So when someone receives a message, a rumor about some heinous, like say child kidnapping and so on, and it turns out to be a rumor, you anyway have that information from where that message came. So you always have the last hop information, the last originator information. So I'm just pointing out that when we're looking at all of these kinds of solutions, we actually have to look at whether they fix a concrete problem or whether they're just messing with things like end-to-end encryption for no discernible reason. The last point I'd like to make is that we should be very careful when we're taking shortcut approaches to making laws. These are the kinds of things that we need careful consideration, input from experts, okay, and what is essentially a lawmaking process. The courts are not experts. For instance, just today, the Attorney General, he cited the blue whale challenge as an example of something that harmed
it's part of Rubin's petition as well. Yeah.
Now the blue whale challenge is a hoax. The Ministry of Electronics and IT found it to be a hoax. The Kerala Cyberbullies found it to be a hoax. There is not a single documented case in India where there's any death linked to, or any harm in fact, linked to the blue whale challenge. It was a complete hoax.
Yeah.
Now that piece of fake news is now being cited in front of the Supreme Court by people who want to curb fake news. I can't think of a greater irony.
Yeah. That's an interesting point, Pranesh, I must admit. Aishwarya, you have a closing comment before I tell our viewers how they voted in our Twitter poll. Remember, we've asked you, should governments have access to social media chats? The results are very interesting. Aishwarya?
Yeah, well, I do have a comment to make on what Mr. Prakash was saying. A lot of, a highlight is being made that anonymity which is there on the social media platforms, that will be lost, and anonymous speech is as much protected under the free speech. There's no doubt. Nobody is taking away the anonymous speech. Yeah. That there is no curtailment there. The only issue is when that speech crosses the boundaries. Now, Article 19, the free speech article, also has those parameters. So if that speech becomes, a criminal activity, it becomes defamatory, it becomes seditious. If it crosses those parameters and becomes unconstitutional and illegal, then the remedy has to be there. You heard the activist here. All that Aadhaar is one idea which I don't agree with, but the purpose and purport of this petition is to make the whole place, the virtual world has to be made safe.
Yeah, but it's gaining currency. The Aadhaar idea has gained currency. The Tamil Nadu government has pushed for it. The Attorney General representing the Tamil Nadu government has pushed for it. So it's definitely under consideration. It's not just a figment of Mr. Rubin's imagination anymore. It's gone way beyond that. What did you say? We asked you, should governments have access to social media chats? Whatever the reason may be. In the broader question, the results are pretty interesting. 46% people who took part in this poll say yes, 54% say no. So a lot of people do say no, and considering it's a poll that took place on a social media platform, it's interesting to me that 46% people think that the government should have access to their own information and chats. Well, we'll take a very short break and thank all of our panelists for joining us on the first debate this evening. When I come back, I have a very, very interesting guest. I'm speaking with the ISRO chairman on a day that India is literally over the moon. We've hit a big milestone in our journey to the first soft landing on the moon with Chandrayaan 2. He's going to explain all the details when we come back.